They told her the Americans would let her die, that prisoners like her, a German woman carrying the enemy's shame, deserved no mercy. But when 24-year-old Greta Hoffman felt her baby stop moving inside an American POW camp in April 1945, the enemy didn't turn away. They wheeled her into an operating room. She expected death. Instead, she woke to the sound of crying. Before we begin this remarkable story of life and death, mercy and transformation, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. These forgotten stories of World War II deserve to be remembered and shared. Now let's continue. The spring rain fell cold over Camp Ruston, Louisiana, turning the red clay roads into rivers of mud. It was April 1945 and the war in Europe was ending, but for the women arriving at the camp that morning, the future remained terrifyingly uncertain. They stepped off military trucks in small groups, their civilian clothes soaked through, their faces blank with exhaustion. Greta Hoffman was among them, though she moved more slowly than the others. Her hand rested protectively on her swollen belly, now 7 months round. She was 24 years old, blonde hair pulled back in a practical braid, her face still pretty despite the hollow cheeks and dark circles under her eyes. She had been a nurse in Berlin before the war consumed everything. Now she was a prisoner, carrying a child conceived in the chaos of a collapsing Reich. The other women glanced at her stomach with a mixture of pity and discomfort. Pregnancy in captivity was a burden no one wanted to acknowledge. Some whispered that she was foolish to have carried it this far. Others said nothing at all, their silence heavy with judgment. The camp spread before them, a sprawling compound of wooden barracks surrounded by fences and guard towers. American soldiers stood at intervals, rifles slung casually over their shoulders. The sight should have been terrifying, but Greta was too tired to feel fear anymore. She had felt nothing but exhaustion for weeks, ever since the journey began. First the chaos of surrender, then the long transport across France, the ship across the Atlantic, and finally this arrival in a country she had been taught to hate. The rain had a different smell here than in Germany, cleaner somehow, mixed with pine and something sweet she couldn't identify. The ground beneath her feet was soft and giving, not the hard cobblestones of Berlin or the frozen mud of the Eastern Front. Even the sounds were foreign. Birds she didn't recognize called from nearby trees. The guards spoke in drawling English she could barely understand, their voices neither cruel nor kind, just matter-of-fact. As they were led toward the processing building, Greta noticed the food smell first. It drifted from somewhere inside the camp. Real cooking, not the watery soup or stale bread they had survived on during the journey. Her stomach clenched with hunger so sharp it made her dizzy. The baby kicked in response, a flutter against her ribs that reminded her she was eating for two, or trying to. She placed her hand over the movement, feeling the reassuring push of a tiny foot or elbow. The baby had been active for weeks, constantly shifting and turning. It was the only comfort she had left, proof that despite everything, something inside her was still alive and fighting. Inside the processing building, American officers sat behind desks with stacks of forms and typewriters. One by one, the women were called forward to give their names, ages, and backgrounds. When Greta's turn came, she walked slowly to the desk, very aware of how obvious her pregnancy was. The officer, a middle-aged man with gray hair and tired eyes, looked up from his paperwork and paused. "When are you due?" he asked in careful German. "June," Greta replied quietly. "Early June." The officer made a note on his form, then looked at her again. His expression was unreadable. "Are you having any problems? Any pain?" Greta shook her head, though that wasn't entirely true. She had felt cramping on and off for days, sharp twinges that came and went without warning. But she was afraid to complain, afraid that any problem would make her more of a burden than she already was. Prisoners who became too much trouble disappeared. She'd seen it happen. "We have a doctor here," the officer said. "You should see him tomorrow. Make sure everything is okay." Greta nodded, surprised. She had expected indifference at best, cruelty at worst. This casual concern felt like a trap, something to lull her into a false sense of safety before the real punishment began. Wait, she thought. The fear lingered. Every word felt like it might be her last moment of dignity. The women were taken to the delousing station, a process Greta had dreaded. She had heard stories of humiliation, of women forced to strip and stand naked while guards watched. But when her turn came, she found only female nurses waiting, not soldiers. They were efficient but not unkind. They gave her soap that smelled like lavender, towels that were actually clean, and a simple cotton dress to replace her filthy travel clothes. The hot water of the shower was a shock. Greta stood under the stream, letting it wash away weeks of grime, and for the first time in months she felt almost human again. She placed both hands on her belly, feeling the baby shift and settle. "We're going to be okay," she whispered in German. "We have to be." But she didn't believe it. How could she? She was a prisoner in an enemy country, alone and pregnant. Her husband, if he could even be called that after one hurried ceremony in a bombed-out church, was dead, killed in the fighting outside Dresden. Her family was scattered or dead or missing. The baby growing inside her was all she had left, and she was terrified of losing it. The next morning, true to the officer's word, she was taken to the camp medical facility. It was a long, low building painted white, with red crosses on the roof. Inside, it smelled like antiseptic and something else she couldn't place. Cleanliness, perhaps, or just the absence of death? The doctor was an American Army captain named William Fletcher. He was in his 40s, with graying temples and steady hands that moved with the confidence of someone who had seen too much suffering to be shocked by any of it. He spoke some German, enough to communicate, and his manner was professional without being cold. "Lie down, please," he said, gesturing to the examination table. "I need to check the baby." Greta hesitated, then did as she was told. The table was covered with clean paper that crinkled beneath her. Dr. Fletcher placed his stethoscope on her belly, moving it slowly from one side to the other. He frowned, adjusted the position, tried again. The silence stretched too long. "Is something wrong?" Greta asked, her voice tight with fear. "The heartbeat is there," Dr. Fletcher said carefully. "But it's not as strong as I'd like. When did you last feel the baby move?" Greta tried to remember. "Yesterday? The day before?" The movements had been so constant for so long that she had stopped really noticing them. Now trying to recall, she realized with growing horror that she couldn't remember the last time she had felt that reassuring kick or flutter. "I don't know," she whispered. "Yesterday, I think." Dr. Fletcher's expression remained neutral, but Greta could read the concern in his eyes. "I want to keep an eye on this," he said. "Come back tomorrow. If you notice any bleeding, any severe pain, or if the baby doesn't move, you come immediately. Do you understand?" Greta nodded, but a cold dread was already settling into her chest. Something was wrong. She could feel it now. An emptiness where there should have been life. The mess hall was a revelation. Long tables filled with food. Real food, not scraps or rations, but actual meals. Greta took a tray and moved through the line, watching as servers piled her plate with mashed potatoes, green beans, slices of meat, and fresh bread. There was milk, real milk, cold and white in a glass pitcher. She sat at a table with other women, most of whom ate in stunned silence. One woman, older and gray-haired, whispered to no one in particular, "This is more food than I've seen in 2 years." Greta ate slowly, her stomach protesting at first after so long on minimal rations. The food was good, better than good. It was nourishment she desperately needed. But with every bite, the guilt grew heavier. Her mother was starving somewhere in the ruins of Berlin. Her younger sister had written months ago about making soup from tree bark. And here she sat, a prisoner, eating better than she had in years. The barracks were simple but clean. Each woman had a cot with a mattress, a pillow, and 2 blankets. There was a small wood stove in the corner that kept the room warm despite the spring chill. Greta lay down on her assigned cot, pulling the blankets up to her chin, and placed her hand on her belly. "Move," she whispered in German. "Please move." Nothing. She pressed harder, willing the baby to respond. Still nothing. Panic rose in her throat, sharp and choking. She thought of Dr. Fletcher's concerned expression, the way he had frowned while listening to the heartbeat. Something was wrong. She knew it now with terrible certainty. That night she barely slept. Every few hours she would wake and press her hands against her belly, searching for any sign of movement. By morning she was exhausted and terrified. The baby hadn't moved at all. Greta returned to the medical facility the next morning, walking as fast as her swollen feet would allow. Dr. Fletcher saw the fear in her face immediately. "No movement?" he asked. She shook her head, tears already forming. "Nothing since yesterday. Not a single kick. Doctor, I think my baby is dead." The words came out broken, barely more than a whisper. Saying them aloud made them real, turned her worst fear into something solid and undeniable. Dr. Fletcher guided her to the examination table, his face grave, but not hopeless. "Let me check," he said quietly. "Don't jump to conclusions yet." He placed his stethoscope on her belly again, moving it carefully, searching. The seconds stretched into minutes. Greta stared at the ceiling, hardly daring to breathe. Finally, Dr. Fletcher straightened up, and the expression on his face told her everything she needed to know. "There is a heartbeat," he said carefully, "but it's very weak, much weaker than yesterday." "What does that mean?" Greta asked, though she already knew. She had been a nurse. She understood what a weak fetal heartbeat meant. Dr. Fletcher pulled up a chair and sat down facing her, his expression serious but kind. "It means the baby is in distress. The placenta isn't working properly. It's not getting enough oxygen and nutrients. If it continues like this..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Greta had seen this before, in the hospital in Berlin before the war. Babies who didn't get enough oxygen didn't survive, and at 7 months it was too early. The baby couldn't be born yet. Not here. Not in a prison camp with limited medical facilities. "So my baby will die," she said flatly. "Not necessarily," Dr. Fletcher replied. "But we need to monitor this very closely. I want you to come here every day, twice a day if possible. And if anything changes, any pain, any bleeding, anything at all, you come immediately." Greta nodded numbly. She wanted to ask why he was bothering. She was a prisoner, an enemy. Her baby was German, the child of a dead soldier from a defeated army. Why would they care if it lived or died? But she couldn't form the words. All she could do was nod and try not to cry. Over the next few days, Greta lived in a state of suspended terror. She went to the medical facility twice daily, lying still while Dr. Fletcher checked the heartbeat. Each time it was a little weaker. Each time his frown grew a little deeper. Between medical visits, Greta tried to participate in camp life as much as her pregnancy allowed. The women were given light work assignments, laundry, kitchen help, cleaning. Greta was excused from most of it due to her condition, which only added to her guilt. She felt useless, a burden, taking up space and resources while contributing nothing. But the other women were surprisingly kind. They saved extra portions of food for her, knowing she was eating for two. They helped her with simple tasks that had become difficult with her swollen belly. One woman, Elsa, who had been a midwife in Munich, took particular interest in her condition. "The baby still isn't moving?" Elsa asked one evening as they sat on the barrack steps, watching the sunset over the Louisiana pines. Greta shook her head. "Not for almost a week now. The doctor says the heartbeat is getting weaker every day." Elsa was quiet for a moment, her weathered face thoughtful. "The American doctor, he's trying to help you?" "Yes," Greta replied. "I don't understand why, but yes. He checks on me every day." "That's more than our own doctors would have done," Elsa said quietly. At the end in Munich, there were no doctors left. No medicine, no equipment, nothing. Women gave birth in cellars with no help at all. Many died. The babies, too. Greta had heard similar stories. The Reich's grand promises had crumbled into nothing, leaving its people to suffer and die without help. And now here she was, a prisoner of the enemy, receiving better medical care than she would have gotten in her own country. The contradiction gnawed at her. The meals continued to amaze her. 3 times a day, the mess hall served food that seemed impossibly abundant. Meat, vegetables, bread, milk, even occasional desserts. Greta ate as much as she could, knowing the baby needed nourishment, but the guilt never left her. Every bite felt like a betrayal of everyone she had left behind in Germany. Letters from home were rare and heavily censored, but when one finally arrived for Greta, she tore it open with shaking hands. It was from her mother, written in cramped handwriting on thin paper. "My dear Greta," it read, "we are surviving, though barely. Your sister found work clearing rubble for extra rations. I trade what I can for food, but there is so little. We heard you were taken prisoner. I pray you are safe. I pray for your baby. In these dark times, new life is the only hope we have left." Greta held the letter to her chest and wept. Her mother, starving in a destroyed city, was praying for the baby. But the baby was dying. She could feel it now, the terrible stillness inside her, the absence where there should have been movement and life. How could she write back and tell her mother that the only hope she spoke of was slipping away? On the 8th day of no movement, Greta woke in the middle of the night with a sharp, stabbing pain in her lower abdomen. She gasped, curling onto her side, pressing both hands against her belly. The pain came again, worse this time, radiating through her back and down her legs. Elsa, sleeping in the next cot, heard her moan. "Greta, what's wrong?" "Pain," Greta managed to say through gritted teeth. "Something's wrong." Elsa moved quickly, throwing on her coat and rushing to wake one of the guards. Within minutes, Greta was being helped into a truck, driven through the dark camp roads to the medical facility. Dr. Fletcher met them at the door, his hair mussed from sleep but his eyes alert. He examined her quickly, his face growing more serious with each passing moment. Finally, he straightened up and looked at her directly. "The placenta is failing," he said quietly. "The baby isn't getting any oxygen. I can't hear the heartbeat anymore." The words hit Greta like a physical blow. She had known it was coming, had felt it happening, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way nothing else had. Her baby was dead, dead inside her. All that remained was the terrible waiting for her body to realize it and expel the lifeless form. "I'm sorry," Dr. Fletcher said, and he sounded like he meant it. "I'm so sorry." Greta couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The room spun around her, gray and distant. She was vaguely aware of Dr. Fletcher speaking to a nurse, of being moved to a bed, of hands checking her pulse and blood pressure. But it all felt far away, happening to someone else. "My baby is dead inside me," she thought, "dead inside me, and there's nothing I can do." Greta lay in the medical facility bed as dawn broke over Louisiana. The pain had subsided to a dull ache, but the emptiness inside her was far worse. She kept her hands on her belly, feeling the stillness, the terrible absence of life. Dr. Fletcher had given her something for the pain, but nothing could touch the grief that was slowly crushing her chest. Around noon, Dr. Fletcher returned with another man, an older doctor with silver hair and the insignia of a full colonel on his uniform. He introduced himself as Dr. Samuel Morrison, the chief medical officer for the region. Mrs. Hoffman, Dr. Morrison said in careful German, "Dr. Fletcher has explained your situation to me. I want to be very direct with you because time is critical." Greta nodded, too numb to be afraid. "We believe there may still be a chance to save your baby," Dr. Morrison continued. "Dr. Fletcher detected what he thought was no heartbeat, but I have more sensitive equipment. I found a heartbeat, extremely weak and irregular, but there." Hope surged through Greta so suddenly and powerfully that it hurt. "The baby is alive?" "Barely," Dr. Morrison said. "And it won't be for much longer. The placenta has almost completely failed. The baby is essentially suffocating. Hours, maybe less." The hope died as quickly as it had flared. "Then what can we do?" "We can deliver the baby now. Emergency surgery, a cesarean section." Dr. Morrison paused, his expression grave. "But I need to be honest with you about the risks. You're only 7 months along. The baby is premature. Even if we get it out alive, the chances of survival are maybe 50%. And the surgery itself is dangerous. You could bleed, you could develop an infection. In a fully equipped hospital, I'd say the risks are manageable. But here, in a prison camp with limited resources..." He trailed off, letting her fill in the blanks. Greta understood. They were offering to try to save her baby, but there was a very real chance she would die in the attempt. And even if she survived, the baby might not. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you risk this? I'm a prisoner, an enemy. Why do you care if my baby lives or dies?" Dr. Morrison was quiet for a moment, then he said simply, "Because I'm a doctor. And that baby is a patient. The war is over, Mrs. Hoffman. Germany has surrendered. You're not my enemy anymore. You're just a woman who needs help." Greta stared at him, trying to comprehend what he was saying. The Reich had taught her that Americans were monsters, that they valued nothing but power and domination. But this man, this enemy doctor, was offering to risk his medical license and possibly his career to save the child of a German soldier. "If we don't do the surgery," Dr. Fletcher added quietly, "the baby will die within hours, and you'll have to deliver it naturally, which means you'll have to go through labor knowing the baby is already gone. That's a terrible thing to endure." Greta closed her eyes. The choice was impossible. Risk everything for a 50% chance, or accept the certainty of loss. But was it really a choice at all? Her baby was still alive, still fighting. How could she give up when there was even the smallest hope? "Do the surgery," she said. "Please. Try to save my baby." The medical staff moved quickly. Greta was prepped for surgery within the hour, her belly scrubbed with antiseptic that smelled sharp and chemical. She was given a spinal block to numb her from the waist down, but they kept her conscious. Dr. Morrison explained they didn't have the equipment for general anesthesia, and a spinal was safer anyway given her weakened condition. Lying on the operating table, staring up at the bright lights, Greta felt the fear finally catch up with her. This was really happening. They were going to cut her open, reach inside, and pull out her baby. A baby that might already be dead, might die in their hands, might live for minutes or hours before its underdeveloped lungs gave out. A nurse, an American woman with kind eyes, took her hand. "You're going to be okay," she said in broken German. "We'll take care of you." Greta wanted to believe her, but everything she had been taught, everything she had learned in the past 6 years, told her not to trust these people. They were the enemy. They had bombed German cities, killed German soldiers, destroyed the Reich. How could she trust them with her life, with her baby's life? Yet what choice did she have? Without them, her baby would certainly die. With them, there was at least a chance. It was a bitter irony. She was completely dependent on the mercy of the people she had been taught to hate. Dr. Morrison appeared above her, masked and gloved. "We're ready to begin," he said. "You'll feel pressure, but no pain. If anything hurts, you tell me immediately. Understand?" Greta nodded, her mouth too dry to speak. "All right," Dr. Morrison said, his voice calm and steady. "Let's bring this baby into the world." Greta stared at the ceiling as the surgery began. She couldn't see what they were doing. A sheet had been hung across her chest to block her view, but she could feel the pressure, the tugging, the strange sensation of hands moving inside her body. It should have been terrifying, but the fear had burned itself out, leaving only a numb acceptance. She heard the doctors talking in English, their voices low and focused. Medical terms she recognized from her nursing training floated past: placenta, umbilical cord, contractions. Dr. Fletcher was assisting, his hands steady as he worked alongside Dr. Morrison. Minutes passed like hours. Greta counted her own heartbeats, listening to the rhythm of her pulse in her ears. She thought of her mother in Berlin, waiting for news. She thought of her dead husband, who would never meet his child. She thought of all the babies born and lost in this terrible war, all the mothers who had felt the same desperate hope. Almost there, Dr. Morrison said. The baby is right here. There was a sudden release of pressure, and Greta gasped. Silence filled the operating room, thick and suffocating. No one spoke. She couldn't see anything beyond the sheet, couldn't hear anything except her own ragged breathing. Then, a sound. Weak, thin, barely more than a mule, but unmistakable. A baby crying. Greta's heart stopped, started again. Is that my baby? Yes, Dr. Morrison said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. It's a girl, and she's breathing. A girl. She had a daughter. Alive. Breathing. The impossibility of it hit her all at once, and she began to cry. Great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. The nurse squeezed her hand, tears in her own eyes. She's very small, Dr. Fletcher said, his voice gentle. Only about 4 pounds. But her lungs are working. That's the most important thing right now. Greta heard them working, heard the baby's thin cries continuing. She wanted to see her, to hold her, but she knew it wasn't possible yet. They still had to finish the surgery, close the incision, make sure there were no complications. Can I see her? Greta asked through her tears. Please, just for a moment. There was a pause, then Dr. Morrison nodded to the nurse. A moment later, the sheet was lowered just enough for Greta to see. Her daughter was tiny, impossibly tiny, her skin red and wrinkled, her eyes squeezed shut, but she was moving, her little fists clenching and unclenching, her chest rising and falling with each breath. She's beautiful, Greta whispered. She's perfect. The nurse wrapped the baby in a blanket and carried her away to an incubator they had prepared. Greta watched her go, her heart pulled in 2 directions, gratitude that her daughter was alive, terror that she might still lose her. The hours after the surgery blurred together. Greta was taken to a recovery room where she lay drifting in and out of consciousness, her body exhausted from the trauma. Every time she woke, her first thought was of her daughter. Is she still alive? Is she breathing? Dr. Fletcher came to check on her regularly, monitoring her vital signs and watching for signs of infection or complications. Each time Greta asked about the baby, and each time he reassured her that her daughter was holding on. She's in an incubator, he explained. We're keeping her warm and giving her oxygen. She's small and her lungs aren't fully developed yet, but she's fighting. That's a good sign. On the second day, Dr. Fletcher wheeled Greta's bed to the incubator so she could see her daughter. The baby lay inside the glass box, naked except for a tiny diaper, tubes connected to her small body. She looked even tinier than Greta remembered, fragile as a bird, but her chest continued to rise and fall steadily. She needs a name, Dr. Fletcher said gently. Greta had thought about this during the long hours of waiting. In German tradition, babies were often named after family members, but she didn't want her daughter to carry the weight of the past. She wanted her to have something new, something that represented hope rather than sorrow. Eva, she said softly. Her name is Eva. It means life. Dr. Fletcher smiled. Eva. That's beautiful. I think it suits her. Over the next few days, Greta's body slowly healed. The incision was painful, but Dr. Morrison had done careful work, and there were no signs of infection. More importantly, Eva continued to survive. She gained a few ounces. Her breathing grew stronger. The nurses began to talk cautiously about her chances, using words like promising and encouraging. But it was on the 5th day, when Greta was finally strong enough to hold her daughter, that the full weight of what had happened truly hit her. A nurse helped her sit up in bed and placed Eva carefully in her arms. The baby was still so small that she fit in Greta's hands, but she was warm and alive, her tiny fingers curling around Greta's thumb. Greta looked down at her daughter's face and felt something break open inside her chest. This baby existed because the enemy had saved her. Everything Greta had been taught, everything she had believed about Americans being cruel and heartless, all of it was a lie. These people had risked resources, time, and effort to save the life of a German prisoner's child. They had shown more compassion than her own government ever had. Dr. Morrison came to check on them later that day. He smiled when he saw Greta holding Eva, clearly pleased with their progress. Thank you, Greta said, the words inadequate, but all she had. Thank you for saving us. Dr. Morrison pulled up a chair and sat down with a tired sigh. You know, he said, I've been thinking about something. Before the war, I had a practice in Boston. I delivered hundreds of babies. Rich families, poor families, immigrants, everyone. And I never once thought about which country their parents came from. A baby is a baby. They all deserve a chance at life. He paused, looking at Eva. The war made us forget that. It made us see enemies instead of people. But now the war is over. Now we get to remember what really matters. Greta felt tears running down her face. In Germany, she said quietly. At the end, there were no doctors, no medicine. Women gave birth in basements and rubble. Many died. Their babies, too. My own country couldn't save them. But you saved us? Why? Dr. Morrison met her eyes. Because we could. Because it was the right thing to do. And because Eva deserves to grow up in a world where we're better than the war made us. If the enemy values our lives, why do we not? The question echoed in Greta's mind, but now she thought she understood the answer. The enemy valued life because they could afford to, because their cities weren't destroyed, their people weren't starving. But more than that, they valued life because they chose to, because even after all the death and destruction of war, they had held on to their humanity. Kindness cuts deeper than cruelty. Greta understood that now, holding her daughter close. Cruelty would have confirmed everything she believed about the enemy, but kindness demanded that she question everything, that she acknowledge the lies she had been told, that she admit her own nation had failed its people while the enemy showed mercy. Eva spent 3 weeks in the incubator before she was strong enough to be moved to a regular crib. 3 weeks during which Greta lived in a state of anxious vigilance, watching every breath, terrified that her daughter might suddenly stop fighting. But Eva was stubborn. She gained weight slowly but steadily. Her lungs grew stronger. The nurses began calling her their little fighter, and Greta couldn't help but feel a fierce pride. The other women in the camp rallied around them. They brought gifts, hand-knitted blankets, tiny clothes made from scraps of fabric, a wooden rattle carved by one woman's talented hands. Elsa, the former midwife, appointed herself Eva's honorary grandmother and spent hours helping Greta learn to care for a premature baby. "She's a miracle," Elsa said one afternoon as she watched Eva sleep. "In Germany, she wouldn't have survived. The Americans have equipment we never had, even before the war." Greta nodded, unable to argue. She'd seen the difference herself. The clean medical facility, the abundant supplies, the doctors who had time to care because they weren't overwhelmed by casualties and chaos. Her daughter existed because of American resources and American compassion. It was a truth she couldn't escape. When Eva was 6 weeks old, strong enough to leave the medical facility, Greta was allowed to bring her back to the barracks. The women crowded around to see the baby, their faces softening with wonder. It had been so long since any of them had seen new life, had held something innocent and untouched by war. Greta settled into a routine. Feedings every few hours, diaper changes, endless laundry. The mundane tasks of motherhood felt like a gift after coming so close to losing everything. She wrote to her mother, describing Eva in careful detail, knowing the letter might never arrive but needing to share the news anyway. As summer turned to fall, news began filtering into the camp about the state of Germany. The reports were devastating. Cities in ruins, millions displaced, starvation widespread. The Reich's grand vision had left nothing but destruction. Greta read the news with a heavy heart, thinking of her family struggling in Berlin while she sat in relative comfort in Louisiana. The contrast between her life and theirs was unbearable. She was eating 3 meals a day. She slept in a warm bed. Her daughter had medical care whenever she needed it. Meanwhile, her mother and sister were digging through rubble for anything salvageable, trading their few possessions for scraps of food. The guilt was crushing, but so was the gratitude. How could she feel both at once? How could she be grateful to the people whose bombs had destroyed her homeland, whose army had killed her husband? Yet without them, she and Eva would both be dead. Dr. Fletcher continued to check on Eva regularly, monitoring her development and making sure she was gaining weight properly. He seemed genuinely invested in her well-being, often stopping by the barracks just to see how she was doing. One day, when Eva was 3 months old, he brought a camera and asked if he could take a picture. "For my records," he explained. "She's my first successful premature delivery in a prison camp. I'd like to document it." Greta agreed, and Dr. Fletcher photographed Eva lying in her crib, her eyes bright and alert, her cheeks finally filling out. He also took a picture of Greta holding her daughter, both of them looking at the camera with solemn expressions. "Thank you," Greta said as he put the camera away. "For everything. I don't know how to repay." Dr. Fletcher held up a hand. "You don't owe me anything. Just take care of that little girl. Raise her to be strong and kind. That's all the payment I need." By winter, talk of repatriation filled the camp. The war had been over for months, and prisoners were beginning to be sent home. Greta had mixed feelings about the prospect. Part of her desperately wanted to see her family, to show them Eva, to rebuild some kind of life in Germany. But another part of her was terrified of leaving the safety and security of the camp. What awaited them in Germany? Ruins and starvation. No medical care for Eva if she got sick. No food beyond whatever rations could be scrounged. Greta had read that infant mortality in Germany was staggering. Babies were dying of malnutrition, disease, and cold. "I'm afraid to go back," she admitted to Elsa one evening as they sat watching Eva play with a stuffed toy one of the guards had given her. Elsa nodded slowly. "I understand, but we can't stay here forever. Our families need us. Germany needs us. We have to rebuild." "But Eva, if she gets sick, if something happens—" "She's strong now," Elsa said firmly. The Americans saved her life and gave her a fighting chance. Now it's up to you to keep her safe. You can do this, Greta. You're stronger than you think. Greta wanted to believe her, but the fear remained, sharp and present. She had become dependent on the enemy's mercy, and the thought of losing it terrified her more than she wanted to admit. In January 1946, 9 months after Eva's birth, Greta's name appeared on the repatriation list. She would be sent back to Germany within the month. The news hit her like a physical blow, even though she had known it was coming. Dr. Morrison called her to his office to discuss the transfer. "I've prepared a complete medical file for Eva," he explained, handing her a thick folder. "It documents her birth, the surgery, all her treatments and vaccinations. If you need medical care when you get home, this will help doctors understand her history." Greta took the folder with shaking hands. "Thank you for everything." I don't have the words." Dr. Morrison's expression was kind but sad. "I wish we could send you home to something better, but Germany is in rough shape right now. You'll need to be strong, for Eva's sake." "I will be," Greta promised, though she wasn't sure she believed it. On the day of departure, the women gathered to say goodbye. There were tears and hugs, promises to write if they could find each other. Elsa held Eva one last time, kissing her forehead and whispering blessings in German. Dr. Fletcher came to see them off. He handed Greta a small package wrapped in brown paper. "For the journey," he said. "But formula, vitamins, some basic medicines. It's not much, but it should help for a while." Greta couldn't speak. She just nodded, clutching the package to her chest. As the truck pulled away from Camp Ruston, Greta looked back at the medical facility where her daughter had been born. She thought about that terrible night when she had believed her baby was dead, and the morning when she had woken to the sound of crying. The Americans had given her back her life and her daughter's life. They had shown mercy when they had no obligation to do so. And so the operating room became more than a place of surgery. It became proof that even in war, even between enemies, humanity could persist. For Greta Hoffman, the sound of her daughter's first cry became a symbol of contradiction, of life when she expected death, of mercy when she anticipated abandonment. It reminded her that even enemies can show compassion, and that sometimes compassion cuts deeper than hatred. Years later, when Eva was grown with children of her own, she would ask her mother about the war. Greta would tell her the truth, about the prison camp in Louisiana, about the American doctors who saved them both, about the debt of gratitude she could never fully repay. "The Americans taught me something important," Greta would say. "They taught me that humanity doesn't stop at borders or battlefields, that a doctor is a doctor, a baby is a baby, and mercy is always a choice. Your life exists because someone chose mercy. Remember that. Honor it by showing the same compassion to others." And that is the story worth remembering. If you found this account of life, death, and unexpected mercy meaningful, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more true accounts of World War II history. These stories of ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances deserve to be told and remembered. Share this video with others who appreciate these forgotten chapters of history. These stories, though buried in time, still speak to us today about the power of compassion and the resilience of the human spirit.